I think you said that it might have been harder to connect with the setting. And we were talking about that. And I said, when I play the game in the modern day, when somebody wants it to be set in the modern day, that it's very easy for us to really relate to what's going on. You
Yeah.
know, the
I
victims
don't think
and
I
yeah.
was. I don't think I said I find it
Okay.
hard to connect with the setting, but you were talking about setting it in the modern, and also how it's more difficult when it's vengeful God because it's a very
Right.
impersonal.
Exactly. That's right. Now I remember that.
Right?
Yeah. I have often referred to a setting, a modern day setting in Washington D.C., where there was a very strong academic component, particularly academics who put themselves at the service of powerful politicians.
Right.
And and I hate that so much that it's so easy for me to play the dark master. I can do a mad scientist, non-Hollywood mad scientist better than anybody. Just they're horrible, the ones I do. And so the the connection, you know, when that person is victimizing and, you know, people that the other person actually recognizes in their own minds, you know, culturally speaking,
Yeah.
or performs acts relative to how we live and our own values in the modern day, it's really easy. The I found anyway that putting it in the past has a more cinematic quality. You know,
Yeah.
it's more like seeing it at some, you know, on a screen, and a little bit less like, you know,
Yeah.
it
It's
does. Yeah,
less playing close to home.
yeah. When certain people or a lot of people put cards in their hand, an ordinary playing deck of cards, it's really hard to get them out of that mode, right? The
Yeah. I mean,
feel of the cards, they're just used to
yeah,
holding
and
cards and saying,
the
how do I get
game.
there? Right.
I think the game also the fact that the game has a pretty much explicit win lose condition, right? The
Right.
final
Right.
scene,
Mm-hmm.
either you win or you lose.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I mean it's
Right.
it's a
So
pretty
that's
binary thing in the final
mhm.
scene, right? And
Yeah.
I think there are some interesting bits there where you have the knowledge as a player. I know because you told me in the beginning that in the end we're gonna have this thing. I don't think I actually knew what was gonna happen,
Mm-hmm.
like the what was going to be the stakes, but there was going to be one big conflict with a poker hand that
Right.
I saved
Right.
before. So I know that there is something coming where I'm
Right.
going to need my good cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I'm put in a position where, all right, I can try to resist this command. This command is obviously, this is evil. This is something that repels me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And more important, my character, because I remember there
Right.
were some scenes where my character wasn't actually repelled, right?
Right. Right.
There were these foreign invaders coming
Yeah.
to his country,
And
and
so
he was ordered to slaughter them.
yeah,
And for him, that was
yeah.
not a problem. That was not a repugnant thing because
That's
he
a good
hated
thing
them.
to talk about in a minute, but go on with where you were going. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that when I get these choices, I can right. I always have these three choices when I get a command. I can win, I can lose, I can resist.
Mm-hmm.
And winning and losing are not that. I mean,
No, they're
they
not.
feel
Yeah.
different, but they're not
Right.
thematically different. Winning
Mm-hmm.
and losing are both me losing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because the master gets their way no matter what eventually.
yeah,
Right.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas resisting is the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so me knowing that in the future I am going to have to, like when I need to sacrifice something to be able to resist, and I sacrifice a resource that I'm going to need in that final
Mm-hmm.
scene. And that makes it a thematic choice of sort of, I really don't want to do this. This is horrible, but I am going to do it anyway because of I really don't want this other thing to happen in the future, or the other way around. I'm going to risk this. This might actually damn me. I might get this
But
horrible
it's too
result in
much.
the
This
final
is way
scene.
too much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
I cannot not resist this. I
Right.
can't not
Right.
try to fight this,
I think
and
this
that
is
makes it
very
a really interesting thematic choice.
incredibly productive play space. One thing that I find with Cold Soldier is that although it feels kind of most of the time, you can have these feelings like this is, kind of stagey and kind of contrived and kind of organized almost too much. But then certain scenes, I find myself months later, perhaps permanently, I remember them. The scenes stay with me in my head. The scene in our game, one of them, when your character had actually rescued his former family and was leading them across. And I was imagining these kind of these meadows that we have here in this part of Sweden, these yellow meadows of tall grass. And it's famous that the rivers cut through them, but you can't see the rivers until you get there. So therefore, when you see a ship or a boat going along, it's completely surreal because it looks like it's traveling on the grass. So I was thinking of that kind of terrain, and I was thinking of and it's endless. It just goes on and on and on, right? So, with trees here and there on hilltops. And I was imagining those, and I was imagining this terrified woman and her children, walking hesitantly in the path, not knowing where they're going. They can't communicate with this thing. And they're just hesitantly, fear and trust, just following as this undead man is just walking, in front of them. And it was very compelling. The imagery, we didn't even describe it like that in play, right? We described it a little. But my mind, over time, kept and making this richer and richer. And I'm never going to lose that image. It's there now. I've got it.
It's an interesting thing. Like when you remember things, you tend to add detail that maybe wasn't there. And it sort of sometimes even it gets better with time.
Yeah, well, and this game has a really nice way of doing that. I can look back on several different instances of play, and they tend to be very different. The one in Washington, D.C. was very naturalistic. The scene when the mad scientist was, drunk and demoralized and depressed, and he puts the cold soldier into the passenger side of the car, in the passenger seat, and drives drunkenly all over the place talking to him. And then he works himself up into a rage and pulls over the car because, of course, he had murdered the real scientist. He was actually the jumped up graduate student. And he had murdered, the real researcher. And he's, stumbles out, and he wants the cold soldier to dig up the grade so he can piss on it. That's what he wants. That's the command.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, first of all, you should have seen the player. The player was like, this is not like ripping heads off of muggers. This is very different, right? And so, but the sequence of that, of that conversation in the car is definitely stuck, strong in my head. And so the game has a really nice way of delivering these bits of experience that, to my mind, really stick a lot harder than a lot of other games that I've played.
I wonder if part of that is that I think the game lends itself really well to long descriptive monologues,
right?
Because it's very clear when you're supposed to be speaking and when I'm supposed to be speaking. So that whole scene with my character's wife and child walking behind him as he's returning to kill his master is.
I think you were saying
that was my dialogue,
exactly,
right, or my monologue, because I won final call. And actually, I think I actually got pretty much what I wanted in all of my conflicts.
Most of them. There was an interesting phenomenon at the end for us. You had thrown away some pretty good cards due to certain lines that you weren't going to cross. And and so I was thinking, just statistically, I was thinking to myself, wow, we're going to see a pretty interesting case of, perhaps he's just going to stay in the thrall of the master, due to having drawn the line a few too many times. And I was thinking, and then you pulled incredible cards for your final draw. You were actually able to get a straight, as I recall.
Yeah.
And I had a
Yes.
flush. You know, I mean, cold
You
soldier
had
poker.
two pairs, I think,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. I had two pair. But it was a really good two pair. I mean, there was like two
Yeah.
kings or something like that.
Yeah.
And I I remember that, or I know in Cold Soldier, the poker outcomes are very standard poker. They're not. It doesn't have all these fancy rules with wild cards and all that shit. Right? It's
Yeah.
really boring poker. And when you play boring poker, you win on a pair. You
Yeah.
know, you win on. I mean, somebody gets a straight in boring poker. That happens once a night, right? Hand after hand after hand.
Yeah.
So it's like that. So often you're looking at, you know, I have crap, you have crap. Okay, whose crap is worse?
Mm.
That's
And
that's
I
right.
think it's
Where so to have two pair against a straight, that's pretty lucky. And you weren't, and you didn't have a very stacked hand. You'd thrown away most of your good cards.
yeah. I
So
as I
yeah.
remember, I had this very difficult decision to make,
Mm-hmm.
where because I think it's interesting how the randomness of the
Mm-hmm.
cards affects the
Mm-hmm.
decisions that I have to make. As I recall, I had this decision of this woman who was captured and was
Mm-hmm.
to be sacrificed,
Mm-hmm.
and I really wanted to resist that command. I had a previous, I think, I had a memory where when I was alive during a Viking raid, had saved a woman
That's
from
right.
being violated
Yes. Mm-hmm.
by striking down one of my sort of comrades in
Mm-hmm.
arms, basically. And then I had this scene again after my death, where I was being commanded to actually participate
Mm-hmm.
in this sort of action, and um, and I had the opportunity to resist. I could resist, but in doing so, I would give you a queen, and
Mm-hmm.
you already had a queen.
Right. You're right. Mm-hmm.
That was the big. It was a.
Yeah. That's how I got my high card. That was it was my high pair was
Yeah.
queens. Yeah. Yeah.
So I knowingly gave you a pair of queens,
Mm-hmm.
and that fact that the card in front of me was a queen just made that decision so
Right.
much harder.
Right.
And it's interesting how the randomness is not just do you win or lose. It's sort of it's always up to me,
Right.
but the
It's got a cause.
consequences
Yeah.
is determined by the randomness, by the random factor of the cards.
And I really think that's a big deal in this game. It's nicely designed for that, and it has kind of an almost just enough card influence. And the
Yeah,
card influence has just enough randomness. And then add to that just enough narration and imagination. It's a game that is nicely tuned. It's like a little tripod of balanced things, and each one is just enough to
yeah.
maintain its position.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big theme in the sort of mechanics of it. It's all very minimalist.
Mm-hmm.
It's very
Now, some of
shortly
these
written.
games,
There
yeah,
are very heavy restrictions and so on. So it's a very minimalistic game that does sort of just enough in all
right.
cases.